Welcome back to Pleasure Playbook. Today's playbook is a good one. This is one that I feel like if you're watching TV, pop culture, movies, you're going to see this topic of faking it, faking orgasms, faking your way through sex, and making it really a performative experience. And honestly, we sometimes have TV and porn to blame for this of what does real sex, what real sex looks like is not very well portrayed. And media. And I think a lot of folks, because we have such crummy sex education, are learning what sex is through media. And so today, Steph and I want to talk about how to move from performative sex into embodied sex, where you're enjoying the experience, you are authentically expressing what is true for you, you know how to advocate for what you want, and you know how to speak to the desires and the interests that you have within your body. And you can be honest about what you're experiencing in sexual acts. Thank you for being here. Are you excited?
Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited. I think this is a really important topic that is definitely talked about a lot more in recent years, which I am very grateful for and really celebrating. And I still think that we have a ways to go until female pleasure is really prioritized by women themselves and by their partners. The education that most of us received or didn't receive at all is inaccurate and not empowering in any way. And even movies and books and things that are coming out now, which have slightly more empowering tone, is still not accurately representing what healthy intimacy is. And to be honest, it's probably because there's not really time to be doing that in a movie that's 90 minutes long. 45 minutes of that would be foreplay. And even smut and spicy books that have been on the rise in the last few years, which I think are amazing, still not always an accurate representation of what pleasure for women is like. So let's talk about faking it, because all women in the world could be in a room, and we asked you to put up your hand if you've ever faked an orgasm. The number of people putting their hand up would be extremely high.
I'm putting my hand up.
I'm putting my hand up too. I can't remember the statistic of women, but it's very high. And let's start with saying that's not our fault. It's not your fault. There are reasons why we have been faking it in the past, and hopefully this can serve as your permission slip to start to explore different ways of being and maybe boundaries and conversations that you can start to have with your sexual partners so that you no longer feel like you have to fake it when it comes to intimacy.
Yeah, I hear you. I faked it so much in my early sex life. Like the beginning years of having sex for me were riddled with just riddled with experiences of me faking it. And I have a background in drama, so I was theatrical about it. I knew how to perform. And now the sex that I have, it's so true to my experience. And if I'm not feeling in my body, like I can't drop in, and my partners know that about me and my body. So just want to start it off by saying that. I know Steph has her own experience too. I think she wants to share a story about her own experience of faking it, but we have come to a place now where sex gets to be really embodied and really expressive and very authentic, but it didn't start that way for either of us.
Yeah, totally. I have a really vivid memory of faking it with my first boyfriend, which definitely wasn't the first time I faked it, because I didn't really know about my body. I didn't really own my own pleasure, and I really was in sexual experiences just letting the person I was with determine what we were doing and where we were going and when we finished things. And I didn't have that empowerment over my own pleasure of how to get myself off in partnership with someone else. And I wasn't with men in this case that were prioritizing my pleasure first. Not all of them. I did have many experiences where they were, and that's amazing. But my ex had a very distorted perception of sexuality and female sexuality. And in that relationship, it was very focused and controlled by him. He was great at pleasuring me, and he would focus on my body and taught me a lot, which is amazing. However, when it came to penetrative sex, it was really all about him, and he was in control of my orgasm. So he actually didn't really like me touching myself. He didn't really like me self-pleasuring, and that wasn't really something that I ever really even did at all. And if I would only do it when he was away or do it in secret when he was out of the house, wasn't something that was celebrated. And also I had so much shame around it that I just didn't share it. But I remember it was towards the end of our relationship, we'd been having sex. I remember just not really enjoying it and just thinking like, oh, I'm over it. I'm over the sex. I just want to come. But he wasn't getting me there. And I went to touch myself and he was like, I'll do it.
But
Yeah.
not good.
Disgusting behavior. Ew. So he was like touching me. But by this point, we'd lost the trust. I no longer trusted him. I didn't have the emotional safety because ultimately he was cheating on me. And I think internally I knew that. So that safety and that container was no longer there, which what we know now is that it's pretty hard to orgasm as a woman when all of those pieces have melted away and there's resentment and lack of trust in a dynamic. Didn't know that then, but I just couldn't come. I want to come, but he's not going to get me there. So let's just get this over with. Let's just do a little faking. Let's fake it. And I remember faking it. He wasn't going to let me finish myself. And then afterwards, I went into the bathroom and I lay down on the bathroom floor, just finished myself, had a great orgasm, but I felt so much shame afterwards because it didn't feel good. It's not the way I want to be in a dynamic. It's not when I would be with my partner who I was in love with. And it just felt shitty. And I think that was one of the last experiences that I ever had of faking it. Because luckily from that point forwards, once I broke up with him and moved on, the boundaries were higher, the standards were higher. And then I started eventually to go on my own journey and only then was with somebody who was very focused on my own pleasure. And again, can't remember all of the details, but you don't forget that feeling in your body of so much shame and disconnection. And really what should be and what really can be such a fulfilling and connective, pleasurable experience, being so shameful and so disconnected, it really doesn't have to be that way. And there is a different way that we can form a relationship with sex and with our orgasm and with our pleasure. So wanted to open with sharing that.
Yeah, that experience of taking care of yourself in the bathroom alone after sex is something that I can relate to as well and have done many times. And I remember it being portrayed in, I forget what show or what movie once. And I remember watching it and feeling so validated by that experience that was portrayed. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, a lot of us are doing this. And then the more I got into the work that we do, the more I was like, okay, wow, that experience is so normal. The amount of women who leave a sexual encounter that wasn't fulfilling and go and get their own orgasm on their own. Yeah, it's really, really normal.
Yeah.
I remember one of the times that I faked it, I was on this ski trip with a couple other couples and we were staying in this house and I was new to having sex with this guy who was like a rebound guy I was seeing. And I had said that he had made me come from oral, like, I don't know, something like 5 times or something. And each time was just a peak of pleasure. Like, you know, when you get feeling good, and you're like at the top of the hill, but you like haven't fully come descended.
Yeah.
So you're like in a peak of pleasure, but it's not an orgasm. I just kept counting those little moments and like playing them up a little bit. And then he was 300 feet tall, like walking around the house being like, oh, I made this chick come so many times. Just feeling so proud of himself. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, this is this sex now.
And you were like, actually zero, mate.
Yeah. Because I've always had a really hard time reaching orgasm. I have really trouble letting go. I have really trouble like letting my mind calm down. And I do need a lot of spaciousness within sex to really drop in.
Yeah.
And for years, I wasn't coming in sex with partners.
Very common. That's the experience of many women. So if that is you and you're listening, know that you're not alone in that.
We're all in this together.
A little bit of High School Musical. All right, so let's dive into why are women faking it? Let's talk about a little bit deeper about some of the reasons why women are faking it and then diving into the difference between embodied versus performative sex.
I think my share and your share, 2 obvious answers. One is to get it over with. You're not into it. You're not feeling the moment. It's taking too long. You're over it. So that's one.
For me, from those experiences, it was a lack of education around my body, a lack of communication around sex. I was sexually active in that relationship, but there was no communication around sex. We weren't speaking to what we liked. We weren't saying, oh, I'd love more of this, or I'd love it when you do that. There was no communication around the topic of sex, which to me now in this version is insane. But again, very common experience for a lot of people that they're having sex, but they're not actually talking about it. I think another huge one is really just the lack of education across the board. And men don't really have a fucking clue. And they think that it's one size fits all. And I know for me, I felt if that boyfriend that I had was doing something to me and it wasn't getting me off, I thought there was something wrong with me because he's like, oh, I've done this many a times before and it always works. So if it's not working for you, there's something wrong with you. And I believed that. So I thought that there was something wrong with me or that I was broken because the way he's vigorously rubbing my clit doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, that is so true.
We've all been there.
Yeah, yeah. And I have so much compassion for men too, because they're just supposed to be good at it, right? And it's linked to their masculinity and it's linked to their manhood and their skill set. And they're just supposed to show up and know what to do and know how to please their partners. And how unfair is that, right?
Yeah,
like that is not fair at all. And every person's body that you're going to have sex with is a different instrument to learn. It is a completely different thing. So it's so hard for us to say that, yeah, these men should just know what works for everybody.
Yeah. And it's also worth speaking to that even the same body is going to experience things differently every time, depending on so many factors: sleep, stress, how hydrated you are, where you are in your cycle, how you're feeling, how emotional you are.
Environment.
Environment. So many different factors are at play every time. So maybe one day you want really hard touch, a lot of pressure, you want it faster. And then there's another day where it has to be really slow and really light, almost just like a feather touching you. And this is why communication is really important across the board for us to be able to feel empowered and feel that safety to be able to share what we like and what we desire, knowing that it's going to be changing every time. So let's also help our partners by telling them that as well and being like, hey, just so you know, what I like one day, and this is a little bit complex, what I like one day might not be what I like another day. So let's really create this safe and open, honest dialogue so that we can have fun and be playful and make it sexy and just see each other's bodies like this puzzle that we're trying to piece together each time. And that can be fun. It doesn't have to be this negative thing. It can be really a positive experience for us individually and with a partner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another reason too why we fake it, and I think this goes back to my share, is to stroke the ego of that partner or to be the good girl, quote unquote, or to, perform for that person, for their pleasure, for their enjoyment. And when you're centering someone else's experience and their joy and their orgasm and their pleasure, you strip yourself of the opportunity to really be fully expressed in your own moment. And I think that's really common is we're taught every Cosmo headline when we were growing up and in those formative years of starting to have sex and be engaging in intimate ways was like 5 of the best ways to blow your man's mind, like 5 positions to make him growl. Like those were the headlines of the magazines when you were checking out at the grocery store. Right?
Yeah. So we're constantly being programmed that our pleasure is for someone else. And so this, again, is that permission slip that your pleasure is for you. You get to be the self-source of your own pleasure. And the more that you are connected and embodied with that, the more you'll be able to share that and communicate that and be on the same page as your partner and really be like, let's work together to figure this out. Because women's pleasure is more complex than in a man's body. It's a little bit different. It's a lot more puzzle pieces to figure out. And we got to continue to get to know our bodies. And also worth noting as a woman, because we're cyclical beings, but we are also growing and evolving and changing so much. That is the nature of being a feminine being. We're always flowing and changing. And when we're going through cycles of life, you're going to be ebbing and flowing with that as well. So maybe you are a teenager and then you're in your early 20s and then suddenly you're maturing in your 30s and you're empowered and you feel the most confident you've ever felt. And then you're going to be getting into your 40s and 50s, or maybe you have kids. That's going to change things, right? It's going to completely transform your relationship to pleasure and orgasm and intimacy. And then you go into those later stages of life, perimenopause and menopause, again, everything changes and you're going to have to continue to get to know yourself sexually and continue get to know your body. This is what I've heard from women who are in their 50s who I've done work with around sexuality is what works for me at 30 doesn't work for me anymore. And now it's wipe the slate clean. Let me get to know my body again and let me discover what works for me in this phase. So again, really invitational here to see this as just a continual exploration and evolution of you as a woman, as a sexual being. And that gets to be fun rather than feeling like a chore, for fuck's sake, something else I have to dive into every time because I'm always changing. It's actually a really beautiful thing.
Okay, any other reasons why someone would be faking it that you want to touch base on?
I think the final one is just that we just don't know. There was very little sex ed focused on our pleasure and focused on what it can be for us. And for me, going through the extensive training that both you and I have gone through, that really opened my eyes that I really had no fucking clue around my body. The fact that we have different phases and seasons that we go through in orgasm, that was like mind blowing to me. The fact that everything is so connected to our relationship to self-pleasure. And there's just so many pieces where I've really realized that I didn't know so much about myself and about my body. And when we lack that education, we just don't know. And when we don't know and we don't have language to put to our experience, sometimes it's very hard to communicate what we want and what we desire. And so I think just that lack of education is the biggest piece, that we're worried that by voicing something so vulnerable that it's going to have a negative effect. And so my desire is that each person listening to this can really get to know their body and become a master of their own body first. Like ultimately, that's the most empowering thing that we can do as humans is take our power back, reclaim that connection to our pussy and to our power and to our pleasure so that we're going into any dynamic. Like I know what turns me on and I know what gets me off. And I have that connection to my body that maybe one day if I'm not coming, I can just feel empowered and be like, hey, I'm not feeling it today, or I don't think I'm going to get there. And it's not because of you. It's not because I'm not enjoying this. It's just because this is the experience today, or I'm not feeling it or whatever, so that we can have those conversations. And it comes down to education and empowerment within ourselves and just getting to know ourselves so that we can then start to vocalize that with other people, because it's really hard to vocalize things when you don't have that connection and that sort of empowerment within self first.
Yeah, it's really hard to see examples of pleasure-based sex anywhere when you're learning. Like when you're first exploring sex, there's no real examples of what true sex looks like. And obviously as a teenager or a young adult, you're probably not watching other people have sex. I remember when we were at the retreat, our sacred sexuality retreat, which Steph and I have done podcasts on our own separate podcast about, which we'll probably bring into this conversation at some point. But we were in a room of 100 women orgasming at one time.
Casual.
And being in that experience and seeing how different people self-pleasure and like truly the sounds and expressions and the body shapes that people take was like one of the first times where I was like, oh, okay, it looks way different. It can look like so many different iterations that I didn't even know were possible.
Yeah, totally.
And obviously that's a very unique experience. Not everyone's going to be doing that. But my point there in sharing that is you have to feel your way through an experience that feels true to you so that you can uncover like what that is for you in your body versus playing in your mind that movie, that porn star, that whatever you think is it's supposed to look like, and really dropping into the moment to feel what your body is trying to teach you and move through you.
100%. And we're not supposed to be actresses or actors. We're not supposed to be porn stars. Really, the most beautiful thing when it comes to sex is a human being in their own experience, that they are just letting go and they're just allowing their body to move them into sound and to be in that pleasure. That is so attractive and sexy for another person to experience, but also for yourself. Even if it's just you exploring your own body and your own pleasure, and you're like, whoa, like, what is that sound that's coming out? How cool is that?
Yeah.
How cool is that? Like, you've found that place of surrender to let yourself go, and it gets to be really different every time. And that really is, and we'll get into this, what embodied sex and embodied self-pleasure is. But yeah, I really love that you shared that. I do remember, obviously, I remember that experience. And it was honestly one of the most beautiful experiences that I've had, and just so eye-opening as to what self-pleasure and sex can be. And it was a very empowering situation to be a part of. I left feeling really good after that. One, because I had a great orgasm, but two, it was like how empowering that all of these 100 women are here in their own experience. We're not using each other to get turned on. We're all embodied in our own connection and experience in that moment, yet supporting one another collectively by being in the same space. Hard to describe. If you told me this a couple of years ago, I'd be like, that's fucking weird. But having gone through it, there was nothing really weird about it. And I felt no shame or no discomfort at all by being in that experience. It's just, wow, we're really freaking powerful as women. And our sexuality is really powerful in that what we have access to in our body.
Yeah, we weren't touching each other. We were all independent, but it was like the pleasure ripples, the energy of that pleasure that was coursing through rippled throughout the room, and it inspired. And I think it probably did turn some people on, right? To be able to hear and witness other people in their expression. Do you remember that one time that someone was spanking themselves, and then every time that the girl spanked herself, that the other girl like rippled, like she would like, she reacted to the spank, like, oh. And then the teacher was like, I was getting that like energy because she was right in front of her.
I forgot about that.
Do you remember?
No, yeah. Oh, I love that, actually. That's a little self-spanking happening.
Yeah. And Steph and I were always like, okay, let's like separate. Let's not be close to each
Oh,
other.
yeah. We were opposite sides of the room. Like, this is too close for comfort. We don't need to be like hearing each other moaning and groaning.
Had to be at least 2 bodies away from each other.
I think
Okay,
we're
anyway.
more like opposite ends of the room, though, to be fair, were we?
Well, one of the first day practices, I think we were only like 3 or 4 mats apart from each other. Like,
In the
when we were
morning
just, like,
practices. Yeah, that was different, though. That was fine. I feel like that
Sex Magic, we were like all the way across.
Yeah,
I don't even know where you were in the room.
I know where I was. I think you were the other side.
Yeah.
That was because that was like people had dildos, people had
Their lingerie.
Yeah, whole different experience. We digress. I'm sure
This is not relatable.
Some curiosity here. If you've got questions on this, please let us know, because nothing is off limits. Let's dive into a little bit around performative. We already have, of course, but some of the ways that this shows up is it is driven by these external expectations, right? So it's shaped often by these societal norms, the media, and also partner expectations. And we're not saying that in a way to shift blame to anybody, because for the reasons that we've already explained, there's just a lack of awareness. There's a lack of education. And men, specifically in this example, how would they know? They weren't taught this. You weren't taught this. If we don't know what we like, how can we expect them to know what we like? So there's many external factors here as well that can come into performative sex. And even when we have conversations, if you are hopefully having conversations with your partner or with friends, that can also play in. So-and-so told me about her partner doing this, and then she did that. So let me try and replicate that. It's great to be inspired by others for sure. But if that expectation is playing in, that is maybe not going to be the most helpful thing.
Yeah. One of my girlfriends told us this variation of 69 that she did. And now me and the other girlfriends, we all refer, when we do that sex position, we call it the girl's name.
I love that.
Well, I'll keep that anonymous. But yeah, so we'll call it like that, the Jenna. And I think that's so cool, is when we can actually get together and authentically share like what is happening inside of our dynamics, our sexual experiences. That can be really powerful.
Yeah, totally. One thing I just want to share as well is something that's funny with me is if you're friends with me and you're having sex, I need a full download of experience. Like, I need every detail, and that's the level that I provide to my friends. Like, I'm
11-minute voice notes. Yes.
we've been up to 18-minute voice notes before. I'm gonna send you a
The
play-by-play of
podcast.
every little thing. Like, you are getting every detail from the moment that I arrive, like the pre-messages until like when he's gone.
Your future husband listening to this. Oh, dear God.
But look, if you want to be in my life, you just have to be okay with that's the level. But it's honestly, it brings me such joy and such entertainment to share. And I want that from you. I have a good friend who had sex, and I'm like, give me the details. Give me all of the juicy details. And she's sharing them. I'm like, this isn't enough. You can't just say we had sex. I'm like, what position? Where were you? Where were his fingers?
How many times did you come?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Everything. So it's a running joke. My friends, okay, what details do you want? I'm trying to get them. Look, I'll train you. It's okay. I just fucking love it. Let's get back to performative sex. Another one, which is a huge one for women, is this focus on how we look. So many of us have or have had insecurities around our body. And that worry of how we look, of how our body looks during sex can really impede our feeling and can take us out from being in the body because we're in our head like, oh my gosh, what does my ass look like? Or what do my hips look like? Or how is my belly in this position? I'm all crunched up. And is he looking at my rolls? He's definitely not. He's definitely not wanting to have the lights off or whatever it is. But that really takes us out from the pleasure and the joy of the experience.
Yeah, I always like to invite clients to explore like what could support them in that moment to add into the experience. But even if it does mean like wearing a garment that like does cover that area that's like causing you a little bit of anxiety, or like changing to mood lighting like you love, Steph, or like dimming the lights or putting like a scarf over the lamp so that everything's softer. Like what will help you exhale into the moment? And what can you add as a support if there is an insecurity there, if there's because we all have it, right? There's at one point I had a face full of acne and I didn't even like my face being touched and I needed the lights dim. Like anything overhead was going to freak me out. We have to find these ways that do support our bodies to be able to rest.
Yeah, totally. I just want to share something here, which is off topic, but it's also relevant. My boobs used to be way bigger, even a year or so ago. My boobs, I think, were like almost double in size. Like they were way bigger than they are now. Sad times, but also is okay. And I used to not like doggy, but I used to not like anything like that because it was so uncomfortable for my boobs. Because when you have really big boobs, they're like flying everywhere. It was so uncomfortable because they're like flying everywhere. And I thought that I didn't like doggy, but really I was so in my head because one, I don't think it looks nice, them flying everywhere. I was insecure about that, but also it was just downright uncomfortable. And I was like trying to like, it just didn't feel good. But that's just one example that there's something that I was getting in my head about it. Like, it doesn't look good. It doesn't feel that good. I don't like this position. Boy, was I wrong. It wasn't that I didn't like the position, but there was just something for me, if I'm going to do that, having some lingerie on, to have them a little bit more supported was what was necessary for me and helped me be more in my body than in my head thinking this can't be good for my boobs.
The discomfort of it taking you out of your body, taking you out of the moment, right? It's distracting if it's tender or it's hurting, right? Especially if you're in your cycle and your boobs hurt. Holy, I wouldn't want them slinging around.
Oh, they were everywhere. So we also have performative sex, which can be rooted in insecurity. So any insecurities that we have or having that desire that we really want to impress or please another partner, that can be a reason that leads to that performative sex, especially if you are in perhaps a newer dynamic with somebody and you're wanting to show them what you can do or like really make sure that they feel pleasured in this experience. And sometimes as a woman, it can take between 20 to 40 minutes of foreplay and that warm up to really be ready for any kind of penetration. Sometimes we think that's too long. I don't want to spend that time. Like we want to just get right into it. And I don't want to tell my partner no right away. So there's different elements there that can also be at play. And again, comes back to that education, knowing that if it takes you 40 minutes or an hour to feel ready for penetration, you're not alone. Very common. That's the norm for most women, that it can take a lot longer. And that is beautiful. That gets to be part of the play. There are so many fun things that you can do to warm up your body and get her ready to be a yes to anything being penetrated.
Amen.
All right. So final couple of pieces are that this performative style of sex, there's no good that comes from it. And it has the potential to lead to further disconnection from your own body and from your own pleasure, because this is just a much more external focus rather than being in the feeling and in the body of your experience. That's how it can feel unsatisfying or unfulfilling, because there's this lack of authentic connection to your pleasure, and there's this lack of presence because you're maybe up in the mind or you're focusing on things external. And truly, that is a shame.
Yeah.
Embodied sex, where the juice is. What does embodied sex mean?
What does embodied sex mean? Feeling your body, like being in the experience of your body and what is true for you. I know we've said this in different iterations in this conversations already, but to me, embodiment means like living with your body an expression of your truth. And I know that's a little heady, but moving in a way that feels congruent with the way that you think and feel. So your expression is the way you move, the way you feel, the way you breathe, the way you take postures is all in alignment with how you want to feel and what you truly are in alignment with.
Yeah.
How does that feel to you?
Yeah, I like that. And to tack on to that, I think authenticity is the big word that's coming through for me. Embodied sex is really about getting out of the mind, being in the body, being in presence in that one moment that exists, not thinking about dinner or what you're going to do next or when this is going to end or when you're going to come or any of those pieces, just being in the body, feeling every micro sensation that is arising, feeling that connection to your breath and feeling that connection to yourself. And if you're with another person, that beautiful connection to that other person, because there's that presence, and that really allows for such vulnerability and such deep intimacy, which is where, it just gets so juicy. So that to me is what embodied sex really is: authenticity, connection, and intimacy. This is where we get into that real, true self-expression and the vulnerability as well.
Yeah, I have this visual of taking an elevator from the head, like you're in a little elevator and it's descending down into the heart, into the womb, into the pussy. Like it's coming deeper down into you. And as you descend deeper, you're also waking up to the sensation that's in your body. Yeah, that's how it feels when I speak about it and when I go into embodied sex versus when I'm feeling more of that performative edge or I'm feeling really heady.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's often when I'm guiding people in client calls, I'll share something like that. Like you're in an elevator or you're in the mind, you're a little bubble and your awareness is a bubble, and that bubble is starting to float a little bit down slowly, is going down deeper into the body until that bubble is right in that center of your core or in your pussy. And now that little bubble is just floating around and you're just watching it float around and just noticing what can you feel and what can you sense. That's such a beautiful visual for people to have and really connect with that, especially if you're a visual person, like connect with that visual when you're getting into pleasure by yourself or with a partner, and just give yourself that time and space, which is really important when it comes to embodied sex. It can't be rushed. So embodied sex to me isn't about the quick fix. It isn't about the goal. It's about being in the moment and allowing your body to guide you in that experience. And sometimes that might lead to ecstatic pleasure and deep, beautiful, expansive orgasm. And other times it might not. Other times the body might be saying, not today, or I'm done now, or I want something different than what we were planning. And that's beautiful and that's okay. And I think it really is emphasizing consent within yourself and with another person, and also boundaries within yourself. And again, voicing those to another person. Embodied sex really allows you to listen to your own desires and your limits for that day's experience, which I think is very necessary when it comes to sex.
Yeah. Something that we can offer to at the end of this episode is that guided experience of dropping into the body. For anyone who maybe feels like that's foreign or maybe doesn't feel like that's as easy, we can maybe actually show them what it would look like dropping into the body, because sometimes these words, especially embodiment and authenticity and all, they can feel wordy and soupy, and you're like, I don't know what that feels like. So perhaps we can guide you into that experience if you're not driving and you're in a safe environment to drop in.
Beautiful. When it comes to embodiment, language is very limited as to what we can experience. And so it does have to be felt. So definitely recommend sticking around till the end so you can get a little sense of what the fuck we're talking about. So stay tuned for that. So let's talk about shifting from performative sex to embodied sex. First of all, really starting with self-compassion is necessary. The invitation is to embrace your body as it is, to bring curiosity into your body and your body's experience, and see if you can try to leave any judgment aside for your life, but really when you're in a sexual experience, rather than judging what you might be looking like, what you might be sounding like, what your partner or partners are thinking about you. Can you have complete compassion for yourself and for your body? And even connecting with that before you're going into an intimate experience can be really powerful. So you're heading into that with that connection.
Yeah. And if that feels hard for you, invitation to explore breast massage and self-pleasure, like we talked about in our second episode, are two beautiful rituals and practices to reframe your relationship to your body, reframe your relationship to your own pleasure. Creating a practice around self-pleasure, creating a practice around breast massage is really going to open you up to the magic that's inside of you, like to release more of that judgment, release more of the self-critical nagging voice that may be in your head, and to really step into like feel good self-love.
Beautiful. Couldn't agree more. The next thing is releasing the pressure to perform. And how can you do that? First, the invitation for you is to consider, in what areas of life are you performing? Maybe sex is a big one. What other areas of life do you feel the need? And maybe this isn't even a conscious decision to perform. Because usually when there is something showing up really strong in one area of life, we can, and when it comes to sex, we usually can tie that into other areas and see that there are common themes or common patterns showing up. And especially as women, we have been conditioned to try to fit into this box of something we think that we need to be in order to belong and to be accepted and to be loved. And sometimes, like Jenna shared earlier, being the good girl or showing up perfectly, that can show up. So really get curious about what other areas of life you might be performing rather than being fully authentic in who you are, in your expression and in your desires. And then see and ask yourself, how could I release this need to perform? What do I have to lose? What would happen if I stopped performing and showed up fully and authentically as myself? What does that even look like? All right. The next piece is communicating openly with your partner about your needs, about your boundaries, and about your preferences. So this can be scary when you've been in a long-term relationship. This can be scary when you're entering a new dynamic. This can be scary if you are not used to having conversations around sex, around intimacy, and especially if you're not used to advocating for yourself. The question again here is get curious on your relationship to boundaries in life. How easy is it for you to set boundaries when it comes to work, when it comes to friends, when it comes to yourself and the things that you know you need to be doing for optimal health and happiness? Is that an area that you struggle with? If it is, get curious to see how that might be showing up in your sex life as well. Because something that I see a lot in my work is that the people who are self-proclaimed people pleasers are typically the ones who are the most sexually unsatisfied in relationships. Why? Because those are the people who are just used to going along with what other people are saying are not the strongest advocates for self and standing in their boundaries. And obviously that is going to show up in the realm of the bedroom as well. So if you are a people pleaser, not here to shame and blame you, just here to bring awareness to that and see, can you start to bring awareness for self as how that's showing up in other areas of life, and then start to create some compassionate changes for yourself, and then see how that can trickle on into your sex life and into the bedroom as well, especially when it comes to a partner.
Yeah, two tips that are really helpful too if you're working on communication, especially if it has to do with sex or sensitive topics, is to have them in neutral environments, like to bring up these topics in neutral environments. So a lot of people think that they should talk about sex when people are naked and they're in bed and they're in the moment. But that's when vulnerabilities are really high, and it can be an alarming place to bring those things up, and it may not be met with the most ease. So finding neutral places like a car ride is a really great example of a place where you can have an open conversation about maybe needs, boundaries, preferences. That's pretty neutral. Even just like a walk in the park, going somewhere into nature together. Having it in these areas can be really supportive so that it doesn't feel like an attack on their performance or their goodness, quote unquote goodness within the sexual dynamic. It can be really neutralized. The other thing that can be really helpful too is communicating in a text or in a written form. If you have a hard time face to face sharing things, especially if they're sensitive, writing your partner cheeky text, it can be a bit cheeky or flirty or sexy in a way that you present your needs or your boundaries or your desires that are coming up for you, and sending that off in a little cheeky text can be so fun and playful. And it doesn't have to be this scary big conversation like, you want to try this certain position, you want to try this certain toy, you'd like to bring this into the bedroom, you want to have sex in this environment, whatever it is, right? You can bring some play and levity to the situation through communicating it. Also writing it out, right? Like, I have a sexual fantasy I want to share with you. And I've written this story, or I've written this poem, or I've written this thing. I just want to show you. This is my brain on a piece of paper, and sharing that with your partner in a little love note can be a great way to express things that are maybe harder to do with words.
Couldn't agree more. I have been known to give clients homework of sexting, or to start with writing out a fantasy or something that they are hoping to explore or experience in the bedroom with their partner, because it's such an empowering way to give yourself the space and the safety and the time to get clear on what it is that you're desiring and write that out in a completely no pressure environment when there's not someone sitting there staring at you and you're like, how do I get words out to this very vulnerable ask or desire or boundary? So I definitely agree with that. I think sexting is such an incredible way, as long as there's consent, as long as there is that safety and it's in an appropriate context with somebody, then it's really powerful to continue to get to know and to voice things in a way that feels a little bit safer than speaking those words out loud verbally. Also, it's really great foreplay. So foreplay really starts as soon as you finish having sex one time. The foreplay for the next time has begun. Maybe that is one day, maybe that is 1 week, maybe that's 1 month. Doesn't matter, but that foreplay has begun. So I love to encourage people to engage in a little bit of sexy texting, especially if you have a date or some intimate time coming up. Start that, or you can request that with your partner. Be like, hey, I have a request. Before you come over or before you get home, on your way home, can you send me a sexy text about what you're most looking forward to, or what you want to do to me, or your desire? And that can serve as that starting to warm up the body. That's giving your body more time to start to get a little bit juicy. You can start to fantasize. So definitely encourage that as well, and get into that journal of yours and let yourself go and see, what desires do you have? What is a big sexual fantasy that you have that you would love to bring into the bedroom?
And if you have a corporate phone, write it on sticky notes.
Yeah, don't be doing that on that phone. That's a little bit dangerous. All right. Final piece is exploring pleasure without goals or expectations and allowing yourself to be in the experience itself. What does goalless sex mean to you? How can you take the goal off the table and maybe even challenge yourself to, in your self-pleasure or with your partner, let's take the goal off the table and let's just be in the experience and let's see what comes up. Let's see what that's like.
Mhm.
That's the
One of
final
the
piece.
hottest exercises that I've given to couples before is to either take like orgasm isn't allowed in the sexual dynamic or penetration isn't allowed, right? We talked about that, I think, in another
Yeah.
episode.
Yep.
But yeah, just taking that goal away completely where you like saying you can't come, like you're not allowed to, right?
Oh,
And what does the pleasure look like in that then? If that has to be avoided, how much more pleasure can you teeter on? And how much more pleasure can you greet and welcome in if you aren't allowed to go to that edge? Because the mind frame of that switch where you're always trying to move that bus towards that destination and move that train all the way to the end, if you're take that piece of it away, there's a lot more spaciousness to play and to feel and to experience. And that can be a really erotic, very teasing, very hot exchange.
I love that. And it's making me think about the hottest thing that somebody said to me, which I feel like is something that we all desire to hear, is when you have a partner. I'm just thinking of somebody recently who was just like, I'm not going to stop until you come. Like, we have all the time in the world. You're not going to come until I tell you you can. Things like that. When you've heard these IRL, it's just,
They melt.
yeah, it's such a melting because you can get in your head of, oh my God. And it's happened to me like recently. I was like, I'm taking too long. And when that happens to me, I voice that. Like, I'm in my head and I'll say, hey, I'm actually in my head a little bit now. And I'm starting to think that I'm taking too long. And the partner that I'm with is always, no, you're good, but in a much sexier way of saying it, because when we voice it, we can release the power versus getting so stuck in our ways. And sometimes we just need that reassurance. And I could be down here all day. You think,
Yeah.
get back to it.
Beautiful. The only other thing I wanted to add to this category of shifting from performative to embodied is if you're practicing this just in your life generally, and maybe you want to apply this to sex, but maybe talking about it with sex or applying it to sex right away feels intimidating. The other thing that's really beautiful is just doing embodiment practices. And what that can look like is putting on a favorite playlist or a mood you want to match with a playlist, going into your room, like dimming the lights or turning off the lights completely, and just allowing your body to move, to flail, to express, to roll around on the floor, like to just get primal with it and also just get like silly and make funny faces, make funny postures, just have an exchange that is like artistry with your body to allow yourself to just shake off some of the stiffness, some of the mental clutter that's there, some of the ways we think our body has to move and be to move into what does it want to do. And if you stay with that long enough, you'll get to this sweet spot where a ball starts rolling that is just really true and authentic to you. But you got to get through that awkward bit first. Like you're going to dance a song or two where maybe it doesn't feel like you're quite dropped in. But if you keep staying with it and you trust yourself, then on the other side of that can be a really fun way of just meeting this new edge of what's here and alive for you. And that is powerful.
Very powerful. And I think starting with that question, body, how do you want to move? Body, show me how you want to move. Keep asking yourself, find a phrasing that feels good to you. Keep dropping that in. At first, you're going to be like, I don't fucking know. Body doesn't know. But keep on asking and just stay for a couple of songs and you'll see that your body does know. And when you start to allow yourself to be moved by that wisdom and guidance, your whole relationship to yourself changes because you see that there's so much more untapped potential and wisdom and guidance that you maybe didn't realize was there that you can now source from. So very powerful. The second thing is I'm going to make a Pleasure Playbook playlist for everyone so we can share some tunes for people to drop into. And the final piece as well, which we touch on a lot in our blowjobs episode, is when you are really in embodied sex, when you're in sex with a partner, it changes your experience. So if you're giving them a blowjob or if you're doing something to them, when you're dropped into your body, you start to have the opportunity to source pleasure from that experience versus you being in the experience, for example, giving head and you're moaning, but it's not real. You're trying to sound sexy like you've seen the porn stars do. You're in your head and you're thinking about how quickly you can make him come. Very different experience from you being in your body and seeing how can I find pleasure in the giving because it feels good to me. We dive more into it in that episode, which will be coming.
Literally.
So we'll talk more about that there. You'll get more of a sense of how that can shift because especially when it comes to BJs, a lot of us are doing it from this performative angle versus, wow, I actually love it so much because I have now discovered how I can receive pleasure in that giving. Alrighty.
I'm excited for you guys to have that episode. It's a good one.
It's a very juicy episode.
One of my favorite topics.
Same.
So we're going to end today's episode with a little practice for you to drop from the mind and into the body. So this can be the experience of starting to feel embodied. And also, if you're feeling like you're really trying to wrap your head around how to move towards embodiment and embodied sex, I want you to just explore this practice and see what comes up and what's true for you and have this be the starting point rather than everything else we said. If you're feeling tripped up on that, just come back into the body. So Steph's going to invite us into meditation, visualization with your breath. And if you can't visualize, just focus on sensation.
Beautiful. So we invite you now, if it's safe to do, I invite you to take one moment to place a hand over your heart, one hand over the belly, closing the eyes if that feels good. I'm going to take a moment to take a big breath in through your nose. Nice, full, expansive inhale. Open mouth exhale. And taking these next few moments to continue to lengthen and deepen your breath. Breathing nice and full in through the nose. You can breathe out through the nose or through the mouth. Seeing if you can start to use the breath to slow everything down. Using your exhales as a way to drop deeper into your body. So visualizing a little bubble up in the mind. And with each exhale that you take, that bubble is starting to drift a little bit deeper down into your body, knowing that there's nowhere else to be, nothing for you to do, and that there are no expectations of you. As you breathe, really allowing your belly, your chest to rise and fill on the inhale. And feeling that exhale as it falls away. And then on your next exhale, allowing your whole body to become really heavy, sinking deeper into the chair or the surface beneath you where you sit. Dropping deeper and deeper into the safety of your body with each breath that you take. And feeling how supported you are in this moment. How supported you are by the surface where you rest and by the ground.
Beautiful. And as you sink in deeper and deeper here, I want you to bring your awareness to the top of your head. So as if there was a warm ray of sunshine beating down on the top of your skull, as if you were sitting outside on a hot summer's day. You just came outside from the air conditioning and that beautiful sunshine is warming up your bones. Here, scanning from the top of your head, slowly and in your own timing, down your body. So noticing here any sensation as you greet your head, your eyes, Scanning down your nose, your cheeks, your ears. And I want you to pay attention here. Is there any sensations? Maybe there's a twinge or a tickle. Maybe there's some discomfort. Not labeling anything good or bad, just coming into awareness with this piece of you that may be asking for your attention, for your awareness here in this moment. And continuing to bring that loving presence down past your chin and your neck, coming down your chest, stroking down your arms, noticing any sensation here. And again, just greeting it with curiosity and compassion, and allowing your body to show you something that maybe your mind hasn't caught up with yet here today. Checking in with your heart space. How are you feeling here in this moment? How does your heart feel today? Maybe it's tender. Maybe it's open. Maybe it's hurting. Maybe it's excited. Continuing to breathe as you explore. Continuing to scan down the entirety of your body all the way to your feet. And as you bring this curiosity and presence to the sensations, just noticing what that, if there's any shifts, any changes, any information you can gather from the sensation itself. So to close this out, just staying in the body, I'm going to ask a question and simply notice any response through sensation or thoughts or feelings that arise. As you drop this question into your body, what do you want me to remember? What do you want me to remember moving forward? Beautiful. And if it feels good, you can move your body in any way that it desires to be expressed. Maybe a shake, maybe a wiggle, maybe a dance, maybe a stretch, maybe a something fun and exciting, maybe something crunchy and expressive. Allow your body to be in its expression and to surprise and delight you with what that could look like. So thank you. Thank you for sticking with us to try this practice. And we hope you're feeling a little bit more dropped into your body, into your experience of embodied sex versus performative. That can be a practice that you do before engaging with your partner. That can be a practice that you just start to engage with every now and then to start to feel the difference between operating in your head versus operating in your body. And that beautiful question from Steph of maybe getting a little bit more wisdom from your body and asking it its truth and letting that be your anchor or your lead or your guide. So thank you all. Enjoy. Let us know what you have enjoyed or liked or loved, what you want more of from this episode, any questions that you have. And this concludes this week's Pleasure Playbook. We will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.